Someone in Trouble. Chapter 19. Saving the Day. As soon as Sportacus set foot in Pixel's house, he was confronted by the clamoring alarms, flashing red lights, and the stifling smoke. He vaulted over the couch and dove under the desk, where the air was a bit clearer. Down here, he groped around until he found a thick coil of wire. Seizing onto the lifeline, he gave a decisive yank, ripping the cord out of its socket. But it wasn't the right one. The alarms droned louder and all the more shrilly as the hero felt around to find the next suspect plug. He grabbed it and jerked it loose, then the next one, until at last, grabbing a fistful of cords and giving one final wrench, he pulled out every last wire that could possibly power the chaos raging around him. All at once, the wall of monitors sputtered out and went dark, leaving the room pale and silent. Almost silent, at least. Sportacus thought his ears were ringing at first, because he realized something was still running. It clicked and whined like a squeaky wheel, or a rusty fan. He crawled farther under the desk, curious to find the source. "Sportacus, are you okay?" Pixel called from the door. The boy waved his hands around to disperse the smoke as he stepped gingerly back inside. "Everything's fine," Sportacus called. What was this thing? Smoke was still creeping out of it, but at a much reduced rate. It didn't look like any of Pixel's other computers or machines. The contraption seemed to be cobbled together, if anything. It gave one final chug and wheeze before finally going quiet, all power run out. Once they got all the windows open, it was a matter of time for the smoke to clear. Miraculously, the computers all looked to be just fine. Not a toasted tower or melted motherboard to be found. Once Sportacus plugged all of the wires back in, he and Pixel just had to wait, with fingers crossed, to see if the computer would turn back on. The primary monitor remained black for a moment. Then a blinking green cursor appeared on the screen. Pixel tried his hand at his keyboard again, and this time the computer responded perfectly. "All right." Pixel quickly went to work. "If we're lucky, I can just reset the system back to a restore point from before Robbie's virus, and we'll be back in business." "Robbie?" Sportacus repeated. "He did this? What's going on?" "I don't know," Pixel said. "Robbie was getting along with all of us just fine. Then all of a sudden, he completely shut down, like all his shareware turned into malware. And man, is he mean about it." Pixel's eyes widened as he looked at Sportacus. "He's got Ziggy and Trixie trapped in the park. The last I saw him, Stingy and Stephanie were running away too. We have to check the videos and see what happened to them." This sounds serious. Sportacus could barely stand still long enough for Pixel to pull up the video feeds on his computer. Time-stamped images blinked across the wall of monitors, and Sportacus frowned up at them. There were several different angles of Lazy Park, a handful having perfect shots of the large tree where Ziggy and Trixie were strung up in a net. The bundled-up kids swung gently on the branch as they wriggled around helplessly. It was enough to make Sportacus take a step towards the door, but Pixel cried out and pointed at more of the monitors as the data kept coming in. "Oh, look! Is that Stingy?" Pixel and Sportacus tried to make sense of the footage showing the street, or what was left of it. There were so many holes it looked more like Swiss cheese. Poking out of one of the pits were some desperately wriggling fingers. They scratched at the ground, and slowly a swath of brown hair rose up over the edge of the hole. Stingy's eyes appeared next, staring wildly around until he couldn't hold on any longer, and he slid back down out of sight. Sportacus couldn't stand to see any more. He balled his hands into determined fists and pumped his arms as he threw himself into action. "I've got to help them," he said, darting towards the door. "Stay here and watch for anything else, all right?" "Be careful, Sportacus," Pixel called after him. Sportacus gave a quick wave at the boy before cartwheeling out to the sidewalk and sprinting for the pothole road. "Help! Is anyone out there?" Stingy's plaintive cries drifted out of the pit. Running at full speed, Sportacus lunged up onto the brick wall and sprung off of it with both hands, flipping head over heels to the other side. He landed in the narrow margin between two gaping holes in the ground and held his balance as the pavement crumbled a little more under his feet. In one fluid motion, he turned himself upside down into a handstand and navigated the treacherous terrain with fingers and palms. "Stingy, where are you?" Sportacus called. Every hole looked the same out here, but only one of them was emitting the noise of a child in distress. "Who's there? Help!" Stingy's voice came again, to Sportacus's left. The man wended his way between potholes and dirt piles, until at last he found the boy. Lowering himself down carefully on bent arms, he peered down into the pit. "Sportacus, is that you?" Stingy squawked up at him in disbelief. "Oh, thank goodness! Get me out of here, please!" "Hold on, I'll be right there," Sportacus assured him. With a swing of his legs, he somersaulted straight down into the hole and landed in the narrow space between Stingy's car and the sheer wall. He stumbled ever so slightly. The ground had more give than he would have expected, almost squishy under his feet. It was almost as if it were padded with something. "Look what Robbie did!" Stingy cried, flailing his arms around. "He destroyed my road, and this!" He held up one stiff arm towards Sportacus. The hero looked for any cuts or scrapes, but found none. "What is it?" Sportacus asked. "My cufflink!" Stingy shouted. "He gave it to me before, but now he went and took it! He tore it right off of me! You have to do something!" Sportacus had to chuckle a little, just relieved that Stingy wasn't really hurt. "First, let's get you out of this hole," he said. Taking hold of the fancy boy under the arms, he lifted him up towards the rim of the pit. "Can you climb out?" With Sportacus's added leverage, Stingy was able to scrabble his way up and over the side. He rolled onto solid ground and scrambled to his hands and knees. "What about my car?" Stingy asked. "I'll come back for it later," Sportacus said. He crouched down, all the muscles in his back and legs tensing. With an explosive show of strength, he jumped straight up and grabbed hold of the ledge and hoisted himself up out of the hole. Right now, he had to get to work. Trixie let out what must have been her 15th sigh, each one more exasperated than the last. She could barely move in the net and her legs were cramping. She couldn't reach her hands out to grab the tree or the rope that held her and Ziggy suspended either. Worst of all, she couldn't stand the crunching noises anymore. "Ziggy, would you stop eating the lollipop?" she exclaimed. "If it weren't for that candy, we wouldn't be in this mess." "But we're already stuck," Ziggy said, pulling the sucker out of his mouth to pout. "I may as well have it, can't I?" "Get rid of it," Trixie demanded. "Just one more lick," Ziggy mumbled. Trixie couldn't see Ziggy beneath her to check if he was really stopping. The boy crunched on the hard candy again. Ugh! Trixie ground her teeth together and tangled her fingers in the net. "Let me out!" "Hang on just a little longer," Sportacus called. "I'm coming." "Say what?" Trixie tried to look out through the braiding of the net, not believing her ears. Sportacus! Ziggy gasped and cheered. He wriggled madly and jostled Trixie around in his excitement. Sportacus is back! He's coming to save us! Sportacus bounded through the park in a blue blur. The athletic man lunged up off the ground and grabbed onto the branch where Ziggy and Trixie were tied up. He swung all the way up and around the branch once, twice, 3 times before coming to a rest on top of the bough and getting to work on the rope that kept the net suspended off the ground. The knots came undone easily under his rapidly working fingers. It was almost as though they were meant to come undone on their own, given enough time. But there was no time like the present. When the last knot slipped free, the net plummeted towards the ground with Ziggy and Trixie shrieking all the way. Robbie held tight to the end of the rope and jumped down, stopping the bundle of kids short of the ground by the grace of a few inches. He lowered them the rest of the way more gently and helped to untangle them from the netting. Thanks, Sportacus. I don't know how much longer I could have stood being up there. Trixie shook out her arms and legs and stood well away from Ziggy, taking up as much room now as she could. She let out a loud huff. Ugh! When I get my hands on Robbie! My hero! Ziggy cried as he hugged onto Sportacus's legs. Sportacus crouched down to accept the embrace and check the boy over for any injuries. Other than having wobbly knees and stiff backs, both kids seemed fine. All of the kids were okay. But where was Stephanie?